doing cold exposure right after strength training might not be the best idea. In a
Really?
way,
Okay.
if your goal is increasing muscle size or strength, because you
Okay.
want
Yes.
that response of your body creating inflammation and then recovering it from it gradually, naturally. Um, if you do some form of cardio or skill-based training, then you can do cold exposure, because that's your objective is not necessarily hypertrophy or
Yes.
strength increase. You can do cold exposure before training. That also will help you
Get
increase
into the
adrenaline,
zone.
norepinephrine,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
and
Okay.
activate that. So there's just timings that
I love
are
that.
can be.
Thank you so much, Artur Paulins, for joining me on this call today. I'm so excited to have you here. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about today's topic, which is basically breath work, but then also we're going to be talking about cold therapy, which from my perspective, someone who doesn't do any of those things yet, and maybe after this call I'll change. Like, I'm ready to integrate these things into my life. But for someone like me who's on the outside, it seems like breath work and cold therapy, very trendy, very like people are kind of kind of noticing how the benefits, like how good the benefits are, and more people are putting themselves out there saying, yeah, I'm doing the ice baths and I'm doing all the breath work. And so it's becoming more and more popular. But the way that I see breath work and cold therapy, you can tell me if I'm right or not. But the way that I see both of them is it's a way of disciplining yourself. It's a way of practicing self-control, and a way to kind of bring you into the present moment, which is really hard for people to do these days, like with social media and, everything that's going on in the world. So is that basically what it's about with those, or is there so much more to get into?
Yeah, I guess there's many layers to breathwork and cold exposure, cold therapy, and there's many reasons why people do it. And it is definitely a form of practicing this ability to regulate your response to a stressful situation. Basically, you are inducing stress response or fight or flight response by entering cold water, and you're learning to deal with that response effectively by using your breath, by staying calm, by creating the state where your mind is relatively calm, or you're trying to achieve a calm mind while your physiology is fully ramped up in full fight or flight mode. And that's how I see the benefit of it, purely psychologically, developing this ability. And also the fact that anticipation, it's also part of it. So oftentimes just anticipating the cold water can induce stress and a bit of anxiety.
For me, for sure. Yeah.
And that's why it's also a challenge every time stepping in or even approaching the cold water. And that's allows to notice internal chatter and fears and anxieties, and kind of use that relatively safe environmental stimulus of cold water to practice for the times when inevitably life presents challenging situations and stressful situations.
Because our lives these days are so stressful, so challenging, and it's a real skill to be able to take yourself out of that and kind of ground yourself and come back to yourself. And would you say it's like a form of meditation? Does meditation come into this?
It definitely brings your mind into present moment, and using meditation prior, or using some form of breathing techniques, something that prepares your mind, can be really useful for going into cold water. And it is definitely something that brings you into the present moment.
Yeah. Whenever I see people using cold therapy or breath work, it's usually like high performers, people who have a lot going on in their life and they just want to kind of bring themselves into the present moment. I've done several Tony Robbins courses. I don't know if you're a fan, but I've done several of his courses, and I know he says it in his when he lectures. He says that he jumps in a cold ice bath every morning, like a cold plunge pool, and it's a way of kind of saying to yourself, like, I can do anything. Like I can master this day. So, like if I do this, then it's a great way to set the mood for the day. So I can imagine in what you do, the types of people that come into your workshops, because I know that you travel all over the world and you're doing wonderful workshops around like with large groups of people. I can imagine that's kind of what they're looking for. I mean, what do you find people are looking for when they come to see you for a workshop or as a client?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, there's a broad spectrum of people who are
Mm,
interested in this. Some people are definitely high performers who are looking for the edge or looking for this practice for their mind, something that
mm,
gives them energy, something that helps them be more focused during the day, something that challenges them, or also gives all those physiological health benefits, longevity benefits that come from cold exposure. But also, I find people seek out this practice
mm.
to help with their day-to-day stresses, regardless what sort of occupation they're involved with, right? So it can be really broad spectrum of people, and
Yeah.
sometimes people are looking for something that can help with their depression, which cold is shown to help with that and help with potentially some mental health issues, help deal with anxiety. And so yeah, there's broad spectrum of people who look to learn how to use cold water. And oftentimes I find that I get this feedback from people when they are, even after attending a workshop or a retreat, they are sometimes sending me a message telling me about the difficult situation they faced or a delayed flight, and what comes to their mind is the thing that we practiced on that retreat.
Wow.
This ability to stay calm when the situation could trigger this annoyance or anger or frustration, and oftentimes they revert back to what they have practiced in cold water, and that's amazing for me to hear, to receive,
Yes.
and know that this is being applied in many different situations.
It's incredible. So really, breath work and cold therapy, it is for everybody. Like anybody can benefit from it. It's not just for high performers, it's not just for influencers, it's for everybody. Everyone can benefit. Can I just ask, is is are they trends or do they have a long history?
I mean, cold or practice of some form of breathing
Mm.
control and mindfulness or meditation has been around for thousands of years.
Yes. Yeah.
um yeah, from meditation, from Buddhist traditions to pranayama in yoga. So all of this has been around for a long time. It's just now it has been brought back to people to kind of present it in a more approachable, less dogmatic way and simpler way that anyone can access without needing to subscribe to any particular beliefs. And same with the cold. Cold has been practiced for centuries. I've been reading some um, books from some philosophers, ancient Roman or Greek philosophers, and they mentioned cold baths as a treatment for health, or they have been prescribed cold baths by their doctors at the time. So it has been used for centuries. So it's something that is now being rediscovered, and I think it's really applicable in modern day times because we live in a very narrow band of temperature, right? Because we're always in plus 20 degrees Celsius,
Mm.
regardless in which country we live.
Yeah.
At home, it's heated. We go outside, we have our Gore-Tex, down wool, all the insulation. So we never get to experience high temperature, high heat, or cold temperature. So
Mm.
this is something that brings the stimulation back for our body and our nervous system in particular.
Which is what we're built for, you know. I find it so funny how us as humans, we almost have to relearn what we're naturally built to do. So I can't imagine our ancestors having to think, oh, you know, is cold good for me? Is breath work good for me? Because they just did it. Like
Yeah.
they were just put in the situation, if especially if they're in cold climates, you know, it's something that they just did and they had to deal with day by day. But for us in this modern time, we almost have to relearn how to do all of those things. And I just find it so bizarre. And it's the same with other things like, you know, fasting, for example, or
Mhm.
exercise. Two things that your body is designed to do, but we almost have to learn how to do it. It's like, okay, when I go into the gym, I'm not sure what to do. Like, can you tell me what to
Yes.
do? And then when it comes to fasting, it's like, should I fast? Is it good for me? But these things have been, it's what we're built to do. And it's kind of what our ancestors were doing. Like it's just part of life. And I just find it really interesting. And I think that breathwork and cold therapy fit into that really, really well. So when it comes to yourself, because I know that you have a lot going on, you're super busy with a number of different things. How did you get into cold therapy and breathwork? Like, what was your journey? Why did you need it? Who was your inspiration? Tell us.
Yes. So originally, my interest was with meditation.
Mm.
That was quite a few years back. I was still in university and I was training and competing in martial arts. I was doing mixed martial arts, and I had advice and knowledge and coaching in terms of physical training, martial arts training, or strength training and preparation, but I didn't really know anything about how to deal effectively with my anxiety or stress in anticipation to competition or generally day to day. And generally being curious, I obviously have heard of meditation, but at the time it wasn't as accessible or as popular as it is now. And I seeked out, I looked online, asked questions around, and asked actually my coach at the time, martial arts coach, had a meditation practice. And he recommended actually reading book on free diving, on different techniques. And this book included a lot of pranayama techniques, which are
Mhm.
yogic breathing techniques. And that was my initial exposure to using breath to access those kind of calmer states and regulate my nervous system. And yeah, so that was initial exposure. I've applied it. I kept on practice very simply, maybe spending 10 minutes, maximum 15 minutes daily in the morning, sitting down, practicing meditation. That's been going on for maybe 5, 6 years before I actually decided to dive into it a bit further. Actually, at the time, I was already living in London. I was working in a busy full-time job in construction industry, and I was still training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and competing quite
A
regularly.
lot.
And yes,
Yeah.
and basically I got injured, and and I didn't had my escape, my release of energy through training, and so I couldn't train. And basically that's when I decided to explore a little more the breathwork side of things, and that's how I came across Wim Hof method, and that's when I decided to investigate it for myself, and actually decided to go and see Wim Hof in Netherlands at the time, and just for out of my curiosity, I didn't know that, and it was early days before it became really popular, and it was kind of this obscure thing to do.
Oh, you're very brave for doing that. Yeah. Because I've
It was
seen his courses. I've seen what it looks like. It's like, wow, like you've got brave if you didn't know too
yeah,
much about it back then.
it was yeah, pretty intense, but it was also really cool to be at that stage, getting involved, getting curious, and yeah, that was when I started first training, and I ended up being one of the first international instructors that he trained. And
Seriously.
yeah, yeah,
Wow, I did not
that
know
was a while
that.
ago. And so yeah, I completed the training and basically quit my job at the time and started figuring out how I can teach this. And over the years, I've picked up or learned different other breathing techniques from other teachers, continued exploring cold exposure, then yoga, then personal training, strength training. And so yeah, it's been a long journey exploring these things. And originally it all started from my own curiosity and in connection with martial arts and training.
I can see why when you got into all of this with Wim Hof, I can see why all of a sudden your life was changed, because you're just like, I need to do something with this 'cause it's so special, because you only have to listen, you only have to listen to Wim Hof, and he is so inspirational. And I can imagine when you were there with him, it was quite an experience. And something that a perspective that he has around cold therapy and breath work is that um, we are so comfortable in our everyday lives. Like, we are so, so comfortable. And, like you said, the temperature is always, within a few degrees of perfect. We have televisions and we have transport and we have, everything to do our cooking, and we can just buy whatever we want for convenience. And it's just so, so comfortable that it's actually bad for us. It's bad for our health. It's stagnant. It's stagnation. It's basically a lack of blood flow, because you're not exercising and you're not, shocking yourself with cold therapy, or it's just a stagnation. And I think a lot of us are guilty of that, of just being way too comfortable in life, and I find that is a really cool perspective that he has, and it's just so addictive. I mean, even the way he talks is like, we're too comfortable. It's just so, yeah, I can imagine it was really inspirational when you're actually there, like, to actually have that experience with him. So when it comes to breath work first, let's kind of dive into that one first, then we'll come to cold therapy afterwards. So what is breath work? Because people are probably wondering, okay, so I breathe all the time. So what am I doing wrong? Tell me. What is breath work? What makes it different to just normal breathing? And how do you know if you need to do it?
Yes. So breath work, I don't really have a definition for it, or to be honest, when I started with all of this, I didn't even know that sort of word existed. It was all breathing techniques or pranayama or breathing exercises. And in my mind, it is a spectrum of different uses of breath or medical manipulation or control of your breath. On one hand, it can be very practical application of improving respiratory conditions like asthma, also using particular breathing techniques or exercises to improve physical performance for athletes, improve functioning of your breathing, right? And learn kind of functional aspects of the breathing and unlearn any unhelpful habits that might have been developed over the lifetime. And then it also can be techniques that are used for inducing this meditative state, whether that's pranayama, whether that's Wim Hof method or other breathing techniques that are used as a practice where you sit down and spend 10 minutes breathing in a particular way or controlling your breath to calm yourself down and practice this focused awareness, right? And on other spectrum, it could be completely intense breathing techniques similar to holotropic breathing or conscious connected breathing that induce really intense altered states that are used sometimes for therapeutic reasons and more as a therapy for the mind and emotional therapy more than functional approach to improving respiratory function, right? So there's a spectrum of different approaches to breathing, and it's just it really depends. People find their own way in and their own interest in this, and I think there's so much to learn from many different people, so much to explore and try and test and see what works and what helps. But I find probably the biggest reason to do it or get into it is actually learning about your own mind and how it reacts to you basically paying attention to what's happening inside. And breath is probably the easiest way to start noticing, slowing down and paying attention.
So the reason to do breath work is to pay attention and to go inside yourself. So it's like an extension of meditation in a way, to kind of take yourself away from the noise outside and to go inward, which is good for everyone. I mean, there's no reason why everyone shouldn't be doing something like that as often as possible, because we need it, right? What does a breathwork session, so let's say someone's at home and they want to get started on their own, they just want to kind of dip their toe in the water, what does it look like? What do you do? Do you stand? Do you sit? Like how often do you breathe? How slow or fast? What would it look like, a typical, like how would you recommend someone get started?
So there are many different techniques, but I find that probably the simplest and easiest way to start is just take 5 minutes in the morning. We can do a technique that's called coherent breathing or coherence breathing, which is literally extending your inhales and your exhales, making them equal lengths for about 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out.
Right.
And 5 to 6 seconds. And that helps regulate your nervous system. That helps you access or helps you increase heart rate variability. And so a simple way, really simple, like something like this can be a way to start. There are other different, more intensive techniques like Wim Hof method, where you do cycles of deep breaths followed by breath hold after the exhalation. That's also can be something you can use, include some breath holding in there. There can be other techniques brought in from freediving as well. So there's different ways of doing this and exploring those techniques for yourself. So there's many different ways. If we talk about this kind of self-practice where you practice for 5 to 10 minutes as a form of meditation or as a form of preparation for meditation, because I find oftentimes meditation is presented as this easy fix for everything. But what I find, to get into meditation, it actually takes some work and some practice. It's not an easy thing to do, but it has amazing rewards. So I find that having some sort of 3 minute to 5 minute preparation with breathwork can really help you access some stillness and really then do the meditation where you just pay attention to breath as it is.
So taking long breaths in for like 5 seconds, then releasing for 6, that's one method. Or you can kind of do some research into the Wim Hof method, which is a bit more kind of, energetic, I can imagine. I know what you mean. Having a meditation practice, or I can imagine a breathwork practice, it can be hard to maintain. So you've got to keep going with it, and you've got to, see the benefits to want to keep going with it. But so this is a way to get started, but how do people progress from there? So what is possible with breathwork? Like, how has it changed your life?
I find, or how I usually like to explain the progression in breathwork, I find oftentimes for a lot of people, way into breathwork is through first doing some of the intensive or like more active breathing techniques where you feel sensations in your body, tingling, lightheadedness, and really, it really puts you in the present moment by creating all those sensations. But really to stick with the practice, to really refine your ability to pay attention and notice subtle changes in your mind, in your body, in your breath, progression goes from intensity to subtlety, and over time you can start doing slower, calmer, more subtle breathing techniques, and with time also just doing breath awareness meditation where you simply observe your breath as it is. That's a subtle technique, and that's oftentimes a difficult technique to start with for someone who's agitated or nervous or overwhelmed, just to sit down and pay attention to breath.
Right.
That's a hard thing to do.
It's very hard, especially if someone hasn't bought into it yet. They're like,
Yes.
I'm just doing this because I've been told to do it. But I can imagine once you buy into it, you really see the benefits and you really see the difference. Yeah, but it's hard for people to kind of come to their breath and to kind of observe it.
Yes. And I find it helps to calm yourself down, calm you down. And also, you learn to create a bit of distance, a bit of a distance between mm, stimulus and response, where you
Mm.
get a difficult email or someone, says something that is triggering, and you're able to respond to it more consciously instead of reacting to it. So this self-awareness, this more composed and collected state of mind, that's what can be that is what can be cultivated through practice of breathing and meditation. And I really believe that can have big impact on your life. You can be more calm, collected. You can respond to situations more appropriately. You can be less distracted and scattered, and
Yes.
more present in the moment, and have this calmer, more relaxed energy around you, about you. Not necessarily being docile and sleepy, but actually be more present, focused, and more responsive to situations instead of being reactive to them.
Right, I love that. Who doesn't need more of that in their lives? Like that's just what everybody needs, I think. And I can imagine, just like meditation can last 5 minutes or it can last an hour. Would you say breath work can be the same, or do you not recommend you do it for too long because you don't want to? I'm sure I can imagine doing too much focus on breathing. Does it have an effect on your kind of concentration, your you know, like you
Well, it
don't want
can
to pass
be.
out.
Yes, yes. I mean, there are different ways of using the breath. You can, let's say, attend a session, a guided session, or practice it for yourself, or do it with a facilitator. You can do
Mm,
conscious connected breathing, which usually lasts from 1 hour to 90 minutes. And that's kind of intense breathing practice that is sometimes can release emotions, right?
mm.
And people sometimes can laugh, people sometimes can cry,
Oh,
experience different things. And so that's another way of using the breath. So I don't see there being a limit, as long as you, especially in those longer sessions, find a facilitator who knows what they're doing,
yes.
and they can make sure that you're safe, comfortable, and they also can help you with integrating that experience that you had, and help guide you through the experience.
Right. So having a facilitator is quite a key part of breath work, especially if you want to kind of advance it and do
Yes.
longer sessions. Okay. So how does breath work and cold therapy, are they linked? So for example, on social media, uh, more and more people these days are jumping into ice baths, filming it, everyone's watching because it's really sensational. It's a sensational thing to watch. It's really fun to watch. Are they linked? Do you do breath work during cold therapy?
um I'd say you can do breathwork before
Mhm.
going into cold water to prepare your mind, your body, focus your mind, and that can be really useful. But
Mm,
you don't have to do
okay.
them
So
both.
they're not they're not inextricably linked. Yeah.
No, no. You can
Okay.
go for cold swim without necessarily doing any particular
Okay.
breath
That
work.
makes sense.
One thing I would say is, when you go into water, I'd say not to do any breathing techniques in the water itself, because you
Okay.
can get dizzy, and it can be quite dangerous. So that's why it's good to, if you choose to do any type of breathing techniques, always do it on land, sitting down safely. And then when you go for a swim, or you go for the ice bath, you are just breathing normally.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of ice baths and cold therapy, the furthest I've gone is cryotherapy.
Hmm.
So I've gone in once and I did 3 minutes. I think it was minus 80 degrees or something.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, it was the longest 3 minutes
Hmm.
ever. But you know what? When I went in, I was kind of, like you said, apprehensive, maybe a little bit scared. But then when I came out, I felt absolutely incredible. It's like all of my senses were alive and I just felt really awake and I felt really present. And also during the 3 minutes of the cryo, it's like I was in there. I wasn't anywhere
Mm,
else. I was just focusing on, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through the next 3 minutes? So I was just kind of jumping around and
mhm.
trying to buy the time, and you're in it, like you're
Yes.
nowhere else. And that's what I noticed about it. And I noticed when I came out, I just felt absolutely incredible. But I have to admit, after that, I love to be warm, I love to be cozy. So, and the thought of a cold shower and doing another cryo, I'm just like, oh, maybe I won't, I'm not going to go there again. But I feel like there's so much benefit to be had
Mm.
when you do it. And it's so exhilarating. And I can imagine the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Um, so when it comes to cold therapy, um, why do we need to do it? Like, what is the benefit there? Why would
Mm.
someone put themselves through that besides just how they feel? Like, what's going on in the body when you do that?
Yes. So that feeling that you get afterwards, that exhilarated feeling,
Right.
is your response, nervous system response, right? When you are actually inducing fight or flight or stressful situation. And we have this release of adrenaline and norepinephrine that actually gives this buzz, gives this elated, focused, energetic feeling. And yeah, it helps you be more energetic, and inevitably, regardless if it's cryotherapy or cold immersion, it will release norepinephrine, and you will feel that sensation. And that's why viewing stress as only a bad thing, I don't think it's that useful. But you can also take stress as a good thing, right?
Right. We
We
need
spoke
some
earlier.
stress. Yeah.
We spoke earlier about fasting or
Mm,
exercise. Those are forms of stress, right? And ice bath or cold therapy is also a form of stress. And in the right amount and right dose, that stress leads to adaptation, leads to improvement of health, and just generally stimulates your body the way the way our ancestors had uh, got their body stimulated regardless in which environment they lived in, right?
yes.
And it
Yes.
just helps with that. And that's why you have this increase in energy levels, ability to pay attention to things, and generally increase in energy. And but also there's other benefits like improved immune system function, because you
Mm,
have increased of white blood cell count in your body after regular exposure to cold. You have increase of brown fat or brown adipose tissue, which is
right.
metabolically active fat that helps with insulin sensitivity, helps with increasing metabolic rate. So there's many different things that are happening in your body, also like improved cardiovascular
Mm,
system function, because blood vessels in your hands and feet that normally don't have to work that hard to regulate the temperature. When you go into cold water, they will constrict, and when you get out, they will open up. So this kind of opening and closing is also good for your circulation. So there are many things that are happening physiologically that can have an impact on your general health and well-being.
yeah. So there's not only physical benefits, like you said, you work your cardiovascular system and the brown fat and all of those things. So there's physical benefits in the nervous system. But then I can imagine emotional benefits, spiritual benefits, and mental benefits. There's just so many to be had. If you become strong at something, so let's say you can endure cold temperatures, it kind of spreads over the rest of your life. So once you can do one hard thing, it kind of helps you to deal with other hard things in your life as well. So I run a fasting program for
Mm,
females, and that's a big part of the program. It's like, once it's discipline. Like, discipline is a really important thing to have in life. And I find that fasting is one way of
Mm,
exercising that discipline. It's kind of like if you can be disciplined in one area, then you can be disciplined in other areas as well. And the same goes for exercise and following a healthy diet. I know that there's a lot of criticism out there about doing these health practices and
mm,
people shouldn't have to do that. But I feel that if someone is seeking discipline and they're seeking structure in their life, which I think all of us are to some
mm,
degree, then doing these practices that are uncomfortable are really important to integrate into your life. So I'm really excited to start to integrate cold therapy into my life because I feel I could do with a bit more discipline in that department. um, um, so yeah, I mean that's what I absolutely love about it. We have in the gym here, we have a cold shower, and it's next to a hot shower.
mm.
So, what are your thoughts on switching between cold and hot? Like, is there a benefit there, or is it just a fad?
No, I think it can be also beneficial. Like,
Mm,
obviously, use of sauna together with cold swims has been around for ages, right? So
right.
that's another practice that you can apply. It's just, yeah, being more mindful with it. So combination of cold and heat is also really good. And touching on your earlier point about
Mm,
discipline, I think why this these practices of fasting, exercise, following some sort of disciplined way of eating um, is more important than ever now because cheap dopamine is available to us so
yeah,
readily, so easily.
I
We
love that
can
cheap dopamine. It's great.
we can get cheap
Yeah,
dopamine from social media any
yeah.
moment, any second. We can
Mm,
get cheap dopamine from eating sugar, from
yes.
having food delivered to our doorstep instantly, almost instantly,
Yeah.
right? And we have central heating in our house, so we can always be warm. We can get cheap, high sugar foods, and nowadays it becomes almost something that our ancestors would be considering a paradise, where food and shelter is available for most people living in the West, and now it becomes almost learning to regulate that and disciplining in some ways yourself to avoid those cheap pleasures and cheap dopamine, actually leaning into the discomfort of exercise, fasting, nutrition, cold,
Yes.
all those things.
So I think, don't you think that we all seek that on some level? I think if someone feels depressed or if they feel anxious or they just feel like they're just like, what is life about? Like, and,
Mm,
and we all get that feeling sometimes. I think there's some truth in um, that feeling of knowing that I just need challenge. And I think we shy away from it though, because it's like, why does life have to be so hard? Like, why do I have to do hard stuff in order to feel alive?
yes,
But like we do, and we all know it to be true, but whether we act on that or not is really down to us. But that the challenge is needed to feel alive and to be human. And if you're feeling down, and if you're not feeling great, it's probably because you need a bit more challenge. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify,
yes,
health, mental health at all. We're all different. We all have different things to deal with. But I think for a lot of people, just by inserting something a bit tough and a bit difficult in your day-to-day life, it would probably solve a lot of problems for you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you said, obviously it's a very individual thing. For a lot of people are experiencing a lot of challenge
Yes. Yeah.
all the time, right? But if you're relatively comfortable and safe and
That's correct. That's
you're
what I'm
taken
saying.
care of,
Yeah. Yeah.
then definitely I believe we are physiologically wired for challenge.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and if all of it is eliminated from our life and we have access to food, warmth, and potentially maybe our minds that are wired for challenge start creating some sort of internal challenge, some sort of anxiety or
Yeah.
depression, because we just potentially need to externalize some of this need for being challenged, for being uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
so as I said, I think it's very individual for everyone in different situations, but I find that a lot of people could use some self-induced challenge like cold
Yes,
or exercise or fasting that could benefit their health and well-being.
exactly. There's a great book. I don't know if you've read it, The Comfort Crisis.
I've heard
I
of it, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
and that's the book for you. It's brilliant. The author, I think it's Michael Easter, if I'm remembering correctly, but he basically said this quote that I absolutely love. I'd get it up on my phone, but it's probably too far down my Instagram feed. But he said, "There's something about humans, like we are wired to really thrive when we do really hard shit."
Hmm.
And I absolutely love that. And reading his book, it's basically he talks about how he took himself out of his everyday life and he wanted to do really hard shit. So he went out into the wilderness with a guide and they just survived on the land and
Hmm.
they just built their own shelters and like they had to fast because there's no food. And it was just, but it was just mental what he put himself through. But he said, basically, the gist of the book is that you just come alive, like you just live, and you really come
Yeah.
into your own. And Wim Hof, when he says that aliveness is blood flow is aliveness, and whenever your blood is flowing, like whenever you're like doing something a bit stressful like cold therapy, or if you're exercising, or if he said a really cool one, he said love, like when you're in love, like
Hmm.
those emotions and those things that you do, they increase your blood flow, like you really start feeling alive and feeling human. And I just think that's what we so need. We need that in our life. For someone, I mean, this is so funny. I'm saying this, but I am I'm I'm the least I'm the last person to kind of challenge myself. Like I like TV, I like Netflix, I don't like colds, I like to be warm, I like bed. But I know in my heart, like I know it to be true that it's time to ramp things up.
Hmm.
And I have done in different areas of my life. But I think cold therapy, like I worked myself up to this conversation because I was like, right, after this conversation, I'm going to go into that cold shower at the gym and I'm going to go for
Amazing.
it. So like that's what I was working myself up for, and that's what you're inspiring me to do. Like I just we need that challenge because it kind of wakes you up, and it gives you health. I love it.
I agree. And yeah, if you feel like this, I think once you know the benefits, once you perhaps have read accounts of other people who have benefited from it, doing that for the first time
Mm.
and and reminding yourself that actually you're benefiting from it, even though it is uncomfortable, reminding yourself that it's good for you.
Yeah.
That can really make a big difference. And returning back to it, you're just building on that sensation of actually doing it for your own benefit, even though
Right.
it's uncomfortable at the start.
Yeah. So when it comes to the practicalities of cold therapy, what are the different types? How long do you do it for? Where can you do it? So someone at home, they're like, okay, where do I find the ability to do this? So
Mm.
just break down, like, how does someone get started?
Probably the simplest way to start is with cold showers. So
Mm,
I usually try to recommend this way of starting with cold showers and making this simple as possible without creating too much complication, especially at the start, right? And I'd say probably the simplest way to start with cold showers is actually still enjoying your warm shower, and at the end of the warm shower, just turning water to cold. And obviously that will vary in different countries where you live, how cold the cold water gets.
yeah.
But basically, after warm shower, just turning water to cold, and for the first week, rinsing with the cold water just your arms and your legs, and just finishing with that for the first week. And potentially second week or in the third week, you can decide, hey, I might just turn water to cold and rinse my arms, my legs, and my torso, right? And that's a slow way to build up. And ideally, once you have established this habit of finishing the showers with a cold rinse, you can just continue that for as long as you can and just make it a lifestyle habit that you don't have to think about anymore. It doesn't have to be this thing you have to schedule in and make it something that is very special or you have to prepare for it, but just making it as a regular daily thing. Whenever you take shower, you just finish with cold water. And I find that's probably that would make the most sense to carry this on and have this benefit of exposing yourself to cold water instead of, deciding to do ice baths for a week and then just
Oh,
quitting because
yeah,
it's just too complicated.
right. I was going to say, so is a cold shower, is that enough for someone? Is that enough cold exposure?
It's a good way to start. It's enough to
Okay.
start. And with time, you might find that you want to start doing maybe cold water swimming if you live somewhere
Mm,
north and or in Europe in the winter you can go for a swim and water will be cold enough.
yeah.
You can fill the bathtub at home with cold water and it's probably not going to be ice cold, but
Yeah.
still that's a cold exposure that still gives you ability to
Maybe if you put
challenge
some ice
yourself.
in there, like you just chuck some ice in there, that might kind of bring down the temperature.
Yeah, it can
Yeah.
help, but oftentimes to get water really cold, it takes a lot of ice.
Okay.
So
All right.
but any ice would help, right? And just making it simple, making it easy is the best way. And just play around with it, build up to it, and find your way. And I think making it easy to do and practical to do is probably the best way to stick with it because I really believe consistency, like with many things, is the key. And if you can
Right.
establish that consistency with simple thing of a cold rinse after your
Mm.
shower, that's probably better than, as I said, doing ice baths every day for a week and never doing them again.
I can imagine the time varies as well. So you can do like a couple of minutes, or you could do 10 minutes, or is there a limit to how much time you should be doing? Is there a dangerous limit?
It's very individual, right? And how is the main thing is paying attention to how you feel. If you feel
Mm,
really, uh, really cold, really uncomfortable, and you can overdo it. You can be too cold, and then it will take you too long to recover and get yourself warmed up again. But I'd say just really pay attention to how you feel. At
yeah.
first, I'd say when you get into cold shower or cold water, the initial uh, objective is to calm yourself down and not hyperventilate and actually achieve this point where you can slowly breathe without gasping for air.
Mhm.
And once you have achieved that point, then you can spend, some more time in there and just get out. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. Is really following how you feel and not necessarily needing to time your cold showers or cold immersion.
I can imagine after exercise. So if you're doing exercise, which is a challenge, and then cold therapy, which is another challenge, like I can imagine like combining those two, you'd feel pretty awesome afterwards. So I can imagine kind of integrating it into life, as in doing a workout session, for example, and then taking a shower and then turning it cold afterwards. That might be a nice way to kind of integrate it in and mix it with something that's also really good for you to do as well. Um,
Yes.
do you have a favorite time of day that you like to do it, or do you like to do it before exercise, after exercise, or do you just literally do it when, as and when you can?
Yeah, I usually just finish with cold water
Right.
after I take
Okay.
shower. Um, on during the winter season or autumn, or even the spring, as I live in London, on weekends I would go to Hampstead Heath or go for a
Oh,
swim in the ponds or anywhere I have access to outdoor. And that's my way of easily maintaining it in my day to day or my weekly routine without stressing too much because I don't have a, I don't know, ice bath or some sort of
yeah.
setup at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just do it that way. One thing I would say, so there's different ways of using cold exposure, especially if you're serious about your strength training and
Mm,
doing cold exposure right after strength training might not be the best idea. In a
really?
way,
Okay.
if your goal is increase in muscle size or strength, because you
Okay.
want
Yes.
that response of your body creating inflammation and then recovering it from it gradually, naturally. Um, if you do some form of cardio or skill-based training, then you can do cold exposure, because that's your objective is not necessarily hypertrophy or
Yes.
strength increase. You can do cold exposure before training. That also will help you
Get
increase
into the
adrenaline,
zone.
norepinephrine,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
and
Okay.
activate that. So there's just timings that
I love
can
that.
be important.
That's a really good tip. And also the way you say that cold therapy or cold showers, cold water, cold anything, um, that the way that it's so effective at driving down inflammation, like
Yes,
it's so effective that even after a workout, it could like take your results back a fraction. That's incredible. The fact that it can lower inflammation, which means that, you know, for disease, it
mm,
must be incredible if someone is feeling unwell or if they want to prevent illness. Having cold in your life is a really good way to drive that down and to, you know, make yourself feel better in a way. Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Just one story before we kind of wrap up, because I'm pretty much done. I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I'm ready to
Ready to
get
go into
started,
cold.
especially with the cold, the breath work. I do meditation daily, and I'm, you know, hoping to kind of bring in some breath work as well. But it's funny because every Christmas, my husband's from Ireland. So at Christmas time, it's like minus. It's like so cold. And every Christmas, the whole village that he's from, they all go swimming. And it's something that I used to laugh at him for. And I was like, why
Mm,
would you do that? I would never do that in a million years. But now I'm actually looking at it, I'm like, damn, like that is a really
mhm,
good practice. Like on
yes,
Christmas Day, like jump in the cold water and just, oh my God, there must be so many health benefits from that. So
yes.
not so silly anymore. Like I'm changing my mind.
Totally, totally. You have
Yeah.
to join him next time.
Yeah, I have to join him next. Oh God, now I've said it. I'm gonna have to. Oh God. I think I need to start with cold showers first and then build myself
There's
up.
still some time until Christmas, so you have time to prepare.
You're right. Is there anything that you want to add to this conversation? Is there anything that you think that people are missing or that they really need to know before they get started with breathwork or cold therapy?
No, I think it's simple. There's not
It
much
is
to add to
simple.
it,
Yeah.
and it's easy to bring it into your life. And there's so many more resources now
Mm.
to read, to explore, to learn from. And I think, yeah, having some curiosity, genuine curiosity around this can be really beneficial, and just, yeah, really explore, try it out. Uh, yeah, be mindful of your own sensations and how it feels, and learn from it. I think that's probably
I
the
think
most
you're right.
important.
I think you're right. That's the key. It's simple. So don't overcomplicate it. Just
Yes,
know that cold is good for you. So even if it means like standing in front of the fridge, like just open the fridge door and just get some cold in there. Um,
exactly.
and I can imagine with cold therapy, just to quickly add, do you have to shiver before you know it's taking effect?
There are different protocols, I guess, that shivering can also be beneficial for brown fat
Mm,
generation in your
okay.
body and metabolic reasons, but also you can do it without shivering, and you still
Okay.
get this release of norepinephrine, adrenaline. So there's still benefits even if you don't shiver.
Okay, because the only reason I said that is because maybe standing in front of the fridge isn't that effective, but not to mention bad for electricity bills.
Yes,
But yeah, just keep it simple. Just know that being cold is good for you. And know that meditation and integrating breath work is also good for you. So just play around, do what works for you, do some research, and you know that's all you need. It's like it's absolutely simple, which is so true. How can people find you?
probably easiest is my website,
Mm,
arturpaulins.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter, and also Instagram, Artur Paulins.
yeah.
Really easy. So that's probably the easiest way to find me. If anyone gets any question, I'm always happy to answer. So please feel free to reach out, contact me. Happy to chat, happy to share and direct if there are any questions.
Awesome. Well, that was an awesome conversation. I know that the listeners have learned so much. I've learned so much from you. So thank you so much, Artur. And hopefully we get to have a chat soon again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.